Have you ever stood by a lake, watching the water ripple, and wondered, could a person really walk on that? The story of Jesus walking on water is one of the most famous miracles in history, but it's also one of the most debated. Was it divine power? A misunderstanding? Or something science can explain? Today, we're diving into the heart of this mystery, where faith meets facts, and where the answers might surprise you. 1. The story that defies logic. Matthew 14 verse 25 describes Jesus walking toward his disciples on a stormy sea, defying the laws of physics. For believers, it's a testament to divine power. For skeptics, it's a red flag. But here's what's fascinating. This was not just some ancient legend. The account comes from eyewitnesses, people who swore they saw it happen. So how do we reconcile this with everything we know about gravity and buoyancy? Think about how shocking this moment must have been for the disciples. They were seasoned fishermen. They knew water could not support a person's weight. Yet here was Jesus, defying everything they understood about reality. Some scholars argue that if the disciples had simply hallucinated or exaggerated, they would not have included details like Peter's failed attempt or their own terror. These are not the kinds of details you invent to make a story more convincing. They're the messy, human reactions of people who witness something unexplainable. And here's another layer. The story appears in multiple Gospels, with slight variations. Matthew, Mark, and John all included, which suggests it was not just one person's account. In ancient historical analysis, multiple independent sources reporting the same event add credibility. So while we can debate how it happened, the fact that early Christians widely believed it did is harder to dismiss. 2. The science of water walking. Could it ever happen? Let's get real. Human bodies do not float like that. Water's surface tension cannot support our weight. Even insects need special adaptations to do it. But before you dismiss the miracle entirely, consider this. Nature has moments that look impossible until science explains them. Could there be a natural explanation we're missing? Scientists have actually tested whether humans could walk on water under extreme conditions. In 2006, a French physicist calculated that a person would need to sprint at 67 miles per hour faster than a cheetah to stay atop the water's surface tension. Clearly impossible. But what about natural phenomena? In rare cases, supersaturated salt water can increase buoyancy, and certain types of ice can form nearly invisible sheets. Could Jesus have stepped onto a thin, temporary ice patch forming in the cold night air? Maybe. But then why did the disciples react as if they'd seen a ghost? There's also the psychological angle. When people experience extreme stress or fear, their brains can misinterpret reality. Could the storm have triggered a shared hallucination? It's possible, but mass hallucinations usually involve vague shapes or lights, not a detailed interaction where Jesus speaks, Peter steps out, and the storm calms afterward. The story's specificity makes it harder to write off as pure illusion. 3. The first hope. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. What if the point is not whether water can hold a person's weight, but what the story means? Across cultures, water symbolizes chaos and the unknown. Jesus walking on it is not just about defying physics, it's about mastering fear. His words to Peter, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" hit differently when you think of them as a lesson in trust, not just a physics puzzle. This story is not just about defying physics, it's about defying fear. The disciples were in a boat, battered by waves, when they saw Jesus. Their first reaction? Terror. They thought he was a ghost. That tells us something profound. Even those closest to Jesus struggled with doubt. His response, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid," was not just reassurance. It was an invitation to trust beyond what made logical sense. And that's where faith and science diverge. Science asks, how? Faith asks, why? Maybe the miracle was not in the walking but in the timing, that in their darkest moment, when the storm was fiercest, they weren't abandoned. That's a message that resonates whether you believe in miracles or not. Fear distorts reality, but trust changes how we see it. 4. The skeptic's strongest argument, misinterpretation. Some historians suggest the walking on water story could be a mistranslation. The original Greek phrase could imply walking by the sea, not on it. Others point to rare natural phenomena like floating ice or sandbars that might create illusions. But here's the catch. None of these fully explain why the disciples reacted with terror, as if they'd seen something supernatural. Some linguists argue that the Greek phrase apts thalasses could mean by the sea rather than on the sea. If Jesus was walking along the shore in the dim light, the disciples might have mistaken him for walking on water. But this theory falls apart when you consider the geography. The Sea of Galilee is massive, and boats were often far from shore. Plus, Matthew specifically says they were buffeted by the waves, implying they were in deep water. Another theory suggests a sandbar or submerged landmass. But the disciples were experienced fishermen. They knew where the shallow spots were. And again, why would they react with terror if Jesus was just waiting? The emotional weight of the story suggests they saw something beyond natural explanation. 5. The faith perspective. Why miracles cannot be tested. Science relies on repeatable experiments, but miracles, by definition, break the rules. If you could replicate walking on water in a lab, it would not be a miracle. It'd be a natural law. This is where faith steps in. For believers, the impossibility is the point. It's not about how, but who. Miracles, by definition, break the rules. If they could be replicated in a lab, they would not be miracles, they'd be science. That's why believers argue that demanding scientific proof misses the point. Faith operates in the realm of meaning, not mechanics. It's not about how the water held Jesus up, but what his presence in the storm represented. But here's where it gets interesting. Even science acknowledges that not everything can be explained, yet. Dark matter, quantum entanglement, consciousness, we still do not fully understand these. So while science cannot confirm miracles, it also cannot definitively rule them out. Maybe the real question is not did this happen, but what if it did? 6. The breakthrough. What if both sides are right? Here's a radical thought. Maybe the miracle was not in the water, but in the timing. Ancient texts describe freak weather events, like sudden cold snaps that could freeze shallow waters. If Jesus stepped onto a thin, transparent layer of ice forming in a storm, it would look like walking on liquid, terrifying and awe-inspiring. Does that make it less miraculous? Or does it show how divine timing could use natural phenomena? Imagine this. A sudden cold snap hits the Sea of Galilee. Thin ice forms just as Jesus steps out. To the disciples, it looks like he's walking on liquid. The timing is so perfect it feels supernatural. Does that make it less miraculous? Or does it reveal a deeper truth that what we call miracles might sometimes be nature orchestrated in ways we cannot predict? This is not about explaining away the miracle. It's about expanding our understanding of how divine intervention might work. If God exists, would not he use the natural world in extraordinary ways? After all, even science shows us that reality is far stranger than we think. 7. The real test, Peter's attempt. Peter tries to walk on water too and starts sinking. If this was just a metaphor, why include that detail? It feels like an eyewitness account, something too awkward to invent. And think about it. If you were making up a story to impress people, would not you let Peter succeed? This raw honesty makes the story harder to dismiss. Peter's failure is one of the most human moments in the Bible. He steps out in faith, then panics and sinks. If this story were fabricated to impress people, why include that embarrassing detail? It's the kind of raw honesty that suggests a real event. And Jesus' response, "You of little faith," is not a scolding. It's an acknowledgement that faith is not about never doubting, but about reaching out even when you're afraid. This moment also mirrors our own struggles. How often do we start strong, only to falter when reality hits? The story does not shame Peter, it honors his attempt. That's a powerful message. Doubt does not disqualify you. It's part of the journey. 8. The modern parallels. Miracles today. People still report unexplainable events, near-death experiences, sudden healings. Even modern, walking on water claims. Are they all hoaxes? Wishful thinking? Or is there a pattern science has not cracked yet? The real question is not, can miracles happen, but why do we so badly want, or refuse, to believe them? In 2012, a man in Florida claimed to walk on water during a hurricane. Turns out, it was a sandbar exposed by receding waves. But what's fascinating is how quickly the story spread, because we want to believe in the impossible. Modern miracles often get debunked, but the persistence of these stories reveals something deep in human nature, a longing for the transcendent. Science can explain many mysteries, but not the human heart's hunger for meaning. Maybe that's why the walking on water story endures. It speaks to something beyond facts, something we feel even if we cannot prove it. 9. The deeper meaning, why this story endures. 2,000 years later, this miracle still captivates us. Maybe because it's not just about water. It's about facing storms, literal and emotional, and realizing we're not alone in them. Whether you see Jesus as divine or a teacher, the message is the same. Fear sinks us. Faith keeps us afloat. This story is not just ancient history, it's a mirror. When life's storms hit, do we see only the waves, or do we look for something or someone beyond them? The disciples' fear blinded them to the possibility of rescue until Jesus spoke. How often do we miss hope because we're too focused on the storm? And here's the twist. The miracle did not stop the storm immediately. Jesus let them sit in their fear for a moment before calming the waves. Maybe because growth happens in the tension between doubt and trust. That's a lesson that transcends belief systems. 10. The choice. What do you do with the impossible? At the end of the day, this is not just a history lesson. It's a challenge. Do you need science to explain everything before you believe? Or can you accept that some things might be beyond our understanding, and that's okay? So here's my question for you. Do you think the walking on water story was a miracle, a misunderstanding, or something in between? Drop your thoughts below, and if this video made you see the story in a new light, hit like and share it with someone who loves a good debate. Because some questions are worth wrestling with, even if we never find all the answers.